The oil pressure needle drops like a stone, hitting zero before Lieutenant Bruce Carr can even process what's happening. It's November 2nd, 1944. 3:47 in the afternoon, somewhere over the frozen landscape of Czechoslovakia, and black smoke is already pouring from his Mustangs, cowling like blood from an open wound. The Merlin engine screams, a sound no pilot ever wants to hear. Metal grinding against metal, tearing itself apart from the inside. Just 30 seconds ago, he was leading a strafing run, his fighters sweeping low over a German airfield, their guns hammering the earth below. Now, he's flying a coffin. An 88mm flak shell, just a fragment really, punched through his engine compartment and severed the oil line clean through. Without oil, that beautiful Rolls-Royce Merlin has maybe 90 seconds before it seizes completely. After that, the propeller becomes 400 pounds of dead weight dragging him down, and his P-51 becomes nothing more than a brick with wings. The math is simple and brutal. One option remains. Bail out. He reaches up, pulls back the canopy, feels the freezing wind slam into his face. He rolls the dying Mustang inverted, the world flipping upside down, and then he's falling, dropping into the cold Czechoslovakian sky at 8,000 feet. The silk parachute deploys with a violent jerk, and suddenly everything goes quiet except for the wind. Below him, enemy territory stretches to every horizon like an endless gray ocean. He's 200 miles behind German lines. No radio to call for help. No weapon except a Colt .45 pistol with 7 rounds. No food, no water. Just a torn flight suit and the freezing November air cutting through to his bones. The statistics flash through his mind, the ones they briefed him on back in England. American pilots shot down over occupied territory have a 23% chance of evading capture and making it back to friendly lines. 23%? That means 77% spend the rest of the war rotting in Stalag Luft 3. Or worse, end up in unmarked graves with no one to remember their names. Bruce Carr is about to rewrite those statistics. In 4 days, he won't just escape, he'll do something no American pilot has ever done before. He'll steal one of Germany's most advanced fighters and fly it home. Bruce Ward Carr was born on a cold January morning in 1924 in Union Springs, New York, a small farming town where nothing much ever happened. His childhood was ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of simple American life that doesn't make headlines, except for one thing. When he was 15 years old, in the summer of 1939, Bruce Carr learned to fly. That year matters more than anyone knew at the time. In September of 1939, German tanks rolled into Poland, and the world went to war. A 15-year-old farm kid in upstate New York couldn't possibly know that within 5 years, he'd be dogfighting Messerschmitts over Berlin, dancing with death at 400 miles per hour. But maybe some part of him sensed it. Sensed that flying was about to become the most valuable skill a young man could possess. He didn't learn in some military program or fancy flight school. A local crop duster named Earl who'd been spraying fields for years. Let the kid take the controls of his old biplane one summer afternoon. That was it. That was the moment. Carr was hooked. By the time he turned 16, he had more flight time logged than most Army Air Corps cadets fresh out of training. September 3rd, 1942. Carr walks into a recruitment office and enlists in the United States Army Air Forces. He's 18 years old, tall and lean, with hands that already know what a control stick feels like. The Aviation Cadet Training Program accepts him immediately. His instructor turns out to be Earl, the same crop duster who taught him to fly 3 years earlier. Earl had joined up too, answering the call like millions of other Americans. He takes one look at Carr's application, sees the 240 flight hours already recorded, and recommends him for the accelerated program without hesitation. By August of 43, Carr pins on his flight officer insignia. By February of 44, he's standing on English soil. Assigned to the 380th Fighter Squadron, 363rd Fighter Group, 9th Air Force, his first assignment is the bird that will become his life, the P-51 Mustang. If you asked any pilot who flew in World War II what the finest fighter ever built was, they'd tell you the same thing. The Mustang. The numbers alone tell you why. Range 1,650 miles with drop tanks. Enough to escort bombers all the way from England to Berlin and back again. Top speed, 437 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. Service ceiling, 41,900 feet, high enough to touch the edge of space. Armament, 6.35 caliber M2 Browning machine guns with 1,880 rounds total. Enough firepower to tear a German bomber apart in a 2-second burst. Before the P-51D arrived in numbers, American daylight bombing raids were slaughter. The 8th Air Force lost 60 bombers in a single mission over Schweinfurt in October of '43. Without fighter escort, those B-17s and B-24s were sitting ducks for Luftwaffe interceptors who tore them from the sky like hawks hunting pigeons. The Mustang changed everything overnight. For the first time, American fighters could stay with the bombers from takeoff to target and back home again. German pilots started calling them the long-nosed bastards, and the Luftwaffe began hemorrhaging experienced pilots faster than their training schools could replace them. Carr falls in love with the aircraft the moment he straps into the cockpit. It fits him like a custom suit, the controls responsive under his hands, the visibility perfect through the bubble canopy, the raw power intoxicating. He names his Plain Angels Playmate and paints it on the nose. He has no idea that in 8 months he'll be sitting in a very different cockpit, one with German labels on every instrument and a black swastika painted on the tail. March 8, 1944. Flight Officer Carr scores his first combat engagement over Germany. He spots a Messerschmitt Bf-109 cutting across the sky and gives chase without thinking twice. The German pilot tries to escape by diving for the deck, dropping down to treetop level where the forest reaches up like grasping fingers. Carr follows him down. The chase covers 40 miles at speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour. Both aircraft barely clearing the German forests, wingtips nearly brushing the trees. Carr fires. His rounds miss, stitching empty air. He fires again. One bullet clips the 109's left wing, and the German pilot panics. He pulls up hard, ejects from the cockpit, but he's too low. The parachute doesn't have time to fully deploy. The pilot hits the ground at 60 miles per hour. The 109 crashes into a hillside in a ball of fire. Carr returns to base expecting congratulations, maybe a pat on the back. Instead, his commanding officer calls him into the office. "Carr, that was the most over-aggressive flying I've ever witnessed in my career. You nearly killed yourself chasing that German into the trees. You're being transferred." The kill doesn't even count officially. Technically, Carr didn't shoot the plane down. The pilot killed himself trying to escape. It's the first real indication that Bruce Carr doesn't think like other pilots. Where others see recklessness, he sees opportunity. Where others see limits, he sees suggestions. May of '40. Carr transfers to the 353rd Fighter Squadron, 354th Fighter Group, the Pioneer Mustang Group, the very first Army Air Corps unit in Europe to fly P-51s in combat. These are the best Mustang pilots in the entire war, the legends, the aces. Carr fits right in like he was born for it. June 17, 1944, 11 days after D-Day, Carr scores his first official kill, sharing credit for an FW-190 destroyed over the beaches of Normandy. 2 months later, he makes second lieutenant. September 12, '44. Carr's flight strafes a German airfield at dawn, their guns tearing apart several Junkers Ru-88 bombers sitting on the ground like wounded birds. On the return flight, they spot 30 FW-190s 2,000 feet below them, flying in loose formation. Carr doesn't hesitate for even a second. He rolls inverted and dives straight into them. In the next 3 minutes, he shoots down 3 German fighters, his guns hammering, his Mustang dancing through the sky like it's alive. When his wingman takes damage, Carr escorts him all the way back to friendly territory. Foregoing any additional kills just to protect his fellow pilot, they award him the Silver Star for that mission, the second highest combat decoration for valor in the United States military. October 29th. Carr downs to Bf-19s over Germany in a single engagement. Total confirmed kills, 7.5. He's officially an ace now, his name added to that exclusive list of pilots who've downed 5 or more enemy aircraft. 4 days later, his luck runs out. November 2nd, 1944. Carr hits the frozen Czechoslovakian ground hard, the parachute landing anything but gentle. His ankle twists on impact, a sharp spike of pain shooting up his leg. Not broken, thank God, but badly sprained, swelling already. He gathers the silk parachute quickly, bundles it up, and buries it under a pile of leaves. The Germans will search for him. They always search for downed pilots. He has maybe 20 minutes before the patrols arrive. 20 minutes to disappear. Carr knows the airfield he was strafing is approximately 5 miles north of his position. He knows the Germans will expect him to move south or west toward the Allied lines 200 miles away. He knows his survival depends entirely on doing something they won't expect. So he heads north, toward the enemy. The logic is counterintuitive, but absolutely sound. The Germans will search outward from his landing site in expanding circles, assuming he's running away from them as fast as possible. They won't expect him to move closer to their base, closer to the hornet's nest. And if he's going to survive more than a few days out here, he needs supplies, food, water, maybe a weapon. The airfield has all three. Day 1, Carr moves through the dense forest, staying well off the roads, traveling only at night when the darkness can hide him. His flight suit provides almost no warmth against the November cold. His ankle throbs with every single step, a constant reminder of how fragile his situation really is. He hasn't eaten in 18 hours. Day 2. He finds a narrow stream cutting through the rocks and drinks, the water so cold it numbs his throat going down. He spots a German patrol maybe 200 yards away through the trees and lies motionless in a muddy ditch for 2 full hours while they pass. Barely breathing, his heart hammering in his chest. Day 3. The hunger becomes impossible to ignore, a hollow ache that consumes everything else. Carr is burning 4,000 calories a day just trying to stay warm in the freezing temperatures. He's consumed exactly 0. His body has already started cannibalizing muscle tissue for energy, eating itself to survive. He makes a decision as the sun sets. Tomorrow, he'll surrender. The Luftwaffe treats captured pilots better than the Wehrmacht or the SS do. Aviators have a code, a mutual respect. They understand what it takes to fly and fight at altitude. Carr knows pilots who've spent time in Stalag Luft 3. They describe it as boring but survivable. 3 meals a day, Red Cross packages, letters from home eventually. It beats starving to death in a frozen Czechoslovakian forest with no one to find your body. Day 4, late afternoon. Carr reaches the edge of the German airfield and positions himself in a tree line overlooking the eastern perimeter. Through the bare branches, he can see everything. Hangars, fuel trucks, aircraft lined up in neat rows. FW-190s mostly, a few Bf-109s mixed in. He plans to wait until morning, then walk to the main gate with his hands raised high above his head. White flag, surrender, prison camp, survival. But as darkness falls and the temperature drops, Carr notices something that changes everything. There's a revetment, a protective earthen barrier, about 80 yards from his position. A Focke-Wulf FW-190 sits inside it, partially concealed by camouflage netting that flutters in the evening wind. 2 German mechanics are working on the aircraft under portable lights that cast long shadows across the frozen ground. Carr watches in silence. The mechanics check the fuel level carefully. Full tanks. They run up the engine, and the distinctive sound of the BMW 801 radio roars to life, echoing across the airfield. They cycle the propeller through several rotations, check the magnetos, run through what appears to be a complete and thorough pre-flight inspection. Then they shut it down, carefully cover the cockpit with a tarp, and walk back toward the main hangars, their voices fading into the distance. The FW-190 is ready to fly. Carr's brain begins calculating, running numbers and possibilities faster than he can consciously process them. He's never flown a German aircraft before, not once. He doesn't speak a word of German beyond a few curse words. He has absolutely no idea where the controls are located, how the engine starts, or how the landing gear operates in this specific aircraft. But he knows how to fly. He's logged over 500 combat hours in the air. Every aircraft ever built has a throttle, a control stick, and rudder pedals. The physics of flight don't change just because the instrument labels are written in German. And he's looking at a fully fueled, fully functional fighter aircraft with no guard posted. The surrender plan evaporates like morning mist. Carr waits in the cold darkness until 3 in the morning. The airfield is nearly silent now, just a skeleton crew on night watch, their movements predictable and routine. No activity near the revetment, no patrols, no guards. 80 yards of completely open ground between him and that aircraft. No cover whatsoever. If anyone looks in his direction, if a searchlight sweeps across that open space, he's dead. They'll shoot him before he takes 3 steps. Carr covers the distance in 40 seconds, staying as low as possible, his twisted ankles screaming with every step, pain shooting up his leg like electricity. The FW-190 is larger up close than he expected, more massive. Wingspan, 34 feet. Length, 29 feet. Empty weight, 7,000 pounds, nearly a full ton heavier than his beloved Mustang. The cockpit sits high off the ground, protected by 30mm armored glass that could stop a rifle round. The BMW 801 engine dominates the entire nose section, a 14-cylinder air-cooled radial beast producing 1,700 horsepower. The Focke-Wulf FW-190 is Germany's premier fighter, their answer to everything the Allies could throw at them. First deployed in 1941. It outclassed the Spitfire so thoroughly that the British rushed development of new variants just to stay competitive. German pilots called it Würger, the butcher bird. Allied pilots just called it trouble and tried to avoid it when possible. The aircraft Carr has just reached is likely an A8 variant, the most common model in late '44. Standard armament includes two 13mm MG-131 machine guns mounted in the cowling, plus four 20mm MG-151 cannons in the wings. Maximum speed, 408 miles per hour at sea level. Range, 500 miles. A deadly, proven machine in the hands of an experienced pilot. Bruce Carr is not an experienced FW-190 pilot. He's never even sat in one before this moment. He's never seen the inside of a German cockpit. Everything he knows about this aircraft comes from gun camera footage of them exploding under his fire. Carr climbs carefully onto the wing, the metal cold beneath his hands. The canopy is unlocked. He slides it back with a quiet scrape and drops into the cockpit, the seat hard beneath him. The first thing he notices, the thing that makes his stomach tighten, is that he can't read a single thing. Every label, every gauge, every switch, every control is labeled in German. The instrument panel is a wall of incomprehensible Gothic script that might as well be hieroglyphics. The second thing he notices is that the cockpit is significantly smaller than the P-51's roomy interior. His knees press uncomfortably against the instrument panel, but the control stick falls naturally to his right hand where it should be, and the throttle is mounted on the left side, same as American aircraft. Some things, at least, are universal among pilots and engineers. Carr has approximately 4 hours until sunrise, 4 hours before the airfield wakes up and mechanics discover their missing fighter. He uses every single minute of that time. He traces wiring with his fingers in the darkness, following connections. He identifies gauges purely by their position on the panel, relying on the universal logic of aircraft design. Airspeed is almost always top left. Altimeter, top center. Engine instruments clustered on the right side, where a pilot's eyes naturally fall. He finds the fuel selector valve after several minutes of searching. The magneto switches the propeller pitch control. The starter mechanism is the critical piece, the key to everything. In the P-51, it's a simple electrical system with a button. In the FW-190, he has absolutely no idea how it works. On the right side of the cockpit, his searching fingers find a T-shaped handle with German text stenciled beside it. The word looks vaguely like it might say starter, or maybe he's just hoping it does. He pulls the handle experimentally. Nothing happens. He pushes it forward instead. A mechanical whine suddenly fills the cockpit, high-pitched and rising. An inertia starter, winding up like a child's toy, building energy. He lets it spin for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, the sound growing higher and tighter. Then he pulls the handle back firmly. The BMW 801 coughs once, catches, and roars to life with a sound like the end of the world. The noise is absolutely apocalyptic. 1,700 horsepower at idle still sounds like rolling thunder. Every single German on this airfield will hear it within seconds. Carr has maybe 30 seconds before they respond. He doesn't have time to find the runway, doesn't have time to check the brakes or test the flaps or figure out the radio. He shoves the throttle forward with everything he has. The FW-190 lurches forward violently, the tail coming up almost immediately. This aircraft is nose-heavy, eager to fly, designed for aggressive German pilots. Through the pre-dawn darkness, barely lit by scattered lights, Carr aims the aircraft between two massive hangars, buildings that loom like mountains on either side. Ground crew are already emerging from doorways, shouting in German, pointing at the moving aircraft with wild gestures. 60 miles per hour, 70. The hangars rush toward him, impossibly fast. At 90 miles per hour, Carr pulls back firmly on the stick. The FW-190 leaps into the air like it's been waiting for this moment. Clearing the hangar roofs by what feels like inches, maybe feet at most, he's airborne now, flying a stolen German fighter 200 miles behind enemy lines. Now comes the genuinely hard part. The FW-190's cockpit is an absolute nightmare of unfamiliar systems and unreadable labels. But Carr solves problems one at a time, the way he was taught. Landing gear first, he finds a lever on the left console after several seconds of searching and pulls it firmly. A satisfying mechanical thunk reverberates through the airframe. The gear retracts smoothly. The aircraft immediately accelerates, drag disappearing. Compass next. He identifies the gyro compass by its position and familiar appearance. Orients himself carefully, west, southwest, toward France, toward Allied lines, toward home. Altitude. He climbs initially to 500 feet, then immediately thinks better of it. At altitude, he's visible to every German radar station within 100 miles. Visible to German fighters that could be scrambled to intercept him. Visible to German anti-aircraft batteries tracking everything that moves across their scopes. He drops back down to treetop level instead, 50 feet above the ground, 280 miles per hour. The Czechoslovakian forest becomes nothing but a green blur beneath his wings, trees whipping past so close he could reach out and touch them. This is absolutely insane flying, the kind of thing that gets pilots killed in training accidents. One mistake, one single moment of inattention or distraction, and he'll cartwheel through those trees at 300 miles per hour. There won't be enough left of him to identify. But at treetop level, he's completely invisible to radar. He's too low for flak batteries to track effectively. He's too fast for ground troops to target with rifles. The fuel gauge, one of the few instruments he can actually read by its appearance, shows full tanks. The FW-190 has a range of approximately 500 miles under normal conditions. France is roughly 200 miles away to the west. He has some margin for error, some room for mistakes. For 45 long minutes, Carr flies west, the sun slowly rising behind him, turning the sky from black to gray to pale blue. The terrain gradually changes beneath him from dense forest to open farmland to the scarred, cratered battlefields of eastern France where armies have torn the earth apart. He crosses the front lines, and that's exactly when his problems really begin, when everything gets worse. Allied anti-aircraft gunners scattered across the French countryside see exactly what they expect to see. A German FW-190, complete with black crosses on the wings and a swastika on the tail, flying at low altitude straight toward Allied positions. They don't hesitate. They open fire immediately. 50 caliber tracers arc toward Carr from every conceivable direction. Bright lines of light cutting through the morning air. He's taking fire from his own side, from American soldiers who are just doing their job. He has no radio to announce himself, no way to signal that he's friendly, that he's American. The FW-190 still carries every German marking painted on its skin. To every Allied gunner on the ground, he's just another German fighter looking for targets. Carr does the only thing he possibly can. He flies lower and faster, pushing the aircraft to its absolute limits. He drops to 20 feet above the ground, hedge-hopping, the propeller wash kicking up massive clouds of dust from the dirt roads below. French civilians dive into ditches as he screams overhead at 300 miles per hour. American soldiers fire rifles at him from foxholes and trenches, their bullets cracking past. Every gun in France seems to be shooting at Bruce Carr right now. He estimates later, when he's finally safe and can laugh about it, that every 50 caliber machine gun in existence took shots at him during that 30-mile sprint toward his home base. The FW-190 takes hits, multiple impacts. He can hear them, sharp metallic bangs, can feel the shudders running through the airframe with each strike. But the German engineering holds solid. The aircraft keeps flying, the engine keeps running, the controls still respond to his hands. Ahead, finally, he recognizes the airfield, A-66, at Orcanti, France, home of the 354th Fighter Group. His squadron, his people, safety. He lines up for approach, no time for proper pattern work or radio calls, even if he had a working radio. The anti-aircraft batteries ringing the field are already tracking him, their barrels swiveling to follow his approach. That's when he discovers the final, cruel problem. The landing gear won't come down. Carr pulls the lever he found earlier. Nothing happens. The gear stays locked up tight. He pumps it desperately. Still nothing. No response. He looks frantically for a backup system, an emergency release handle, anything that might help. The FW-190's landing gear operates on hydraulic pressure, a system he doesn't understand. There's a selector valve somewhere that directs pressure, either to retraction or extension. Carr doesn't know this. He doesn't know which lever controls that valve. He doesn't know that he's been pulling the wrong handle for the last 5 minutes while burning fuel and time. Below him, visible through the armored glass, the 354th's anti-aircraft crews are loading their 40mm Bofors guns with practiced efficiency. A German fighter is circling their field at low altitude. They're preparing to blow him out of the sky before he can do whatever they think he's planning. Carr makes a split-second decision. He's going to belly land this thing and hope he survives. He lines up carefully with the grass strip beside the main runway, avoiding the concrete that would tear the aircraft apart. Lowers the flaps. That lever, at least, he figured out through trial and error. Cuts the throttle back to idle. The FW-190 sinks steadily toward the earth. 100 feet, 50 feet, 20 feet, the ground rushing up impossibly fast. The aircraft hits the grass at 90 miles per hour with a tremendous grinding shriek of metal on earth. It slides forward for 300 yards, throwing up a massive rooster tail of mud and debris and torn grass behind it. Finally, mercifully, it grinds to a complete stop. Bruce Carr is alive. Within seconds, maybe 10 at most, the destroyed FW-190 is completely surrounded. Military police, with rifles raised and ready, screaming at the pilot to get out of the cockpit immediately to show his hands. They're expecting a German pilot. They're expecting a prisoner to interrogate. Maybe someone important. The canopy slides back with a scrape. A mud-splattered American pilot in a torn, filthy flight suit climbs slowly onto the wing, favoring his injured ankle. "I'm Captain Carr of this goddamn squadron," he says, his voice hoarse from 4 days without water. Nobody believes him. Not at first. He's been missing for 4 days. He's supposed to be dead or rotting in some German prison camp, and he just belly-landed a German fighter aircraft on their airfield. The MPs keep their rifles trained directly on him, fingers on triggers, until a staff car comes racing across the field. Colonel George Bickle, commanding officer of the 354th Fighter Group, steps out slowly and surveys the scene with disbelief. The destroyed FW-190 smoking in the grass, the mud-covered pilot, the bewildered military police standing around with their weapons raised. Bickle stares for a long moment, then finally speaks. "Where in the hell have you been, Carr? And what have you been doing now?" The story spreads through the Army Air Forces like wildfire within hours. The pilot who stole a German plane, the only American in the entire European theater to take off in a P-51 Mustang and return in an FW-190. But Carr's war isn't over yet, not even close. 5 months later, April 2nd, 1945, near Schweinfurt, Germany. First Lieutenant Carr is leading a flight of 4 P-51s on a routine reconnaissance mission. They're cruising at 15,000 feet when Carr spots movement high above them, dark shapes against the bright sky. German fighters. More than he can count at first glance. A massive formation stacked vertically from 18,000 to 25,000 feet. Carr does a quick mental estimate, counting aircraft as fast as he can. 60 aircraft, maybe more. Bf-109s and FW-190s mixed together. The largest concentration of German fighters he's ever seen in one place. He has 4 P-51s. The German formation is absolutely massive. Bf-109 G-10s and FW-190 D-9s. The latest and deadliest variants of both aircraft, fresh pilots, relatively speaking. The Luftwaffe has been running out of experienced aviators since early 1944. But 60 aircraft is still 60 aircraft regardless of pilot skill. Standard tactics dictate immediate evasion. 4 against 60 is suicide by any calculation. The Germans have altitude advantage, numerical advantage, positional advantage. Every tactical manual ever written says the same thing. Disengage immediately. Break contact. Report the sighting and let the bomber escort squadrons handle it. Get out alive. Bruce Carr has never been particularly interested in what the tactical manuals say. He keys his radio, his voice calm, engaging. His three wingmen don't hesitate or question the order. They've flown with Carr before. They know exactly what he's capable of in the air. They know that when Bruce Carr says engaging, he absolutely means it. The four Mustangs climb aggressively into the German formation. What happens in the next few minutes becomes one of the most remarkable air battles of the entire Second World War. The Germans don't expect an attack from below. Why would they? They outnumber the Americans 15-1. They're flying in a loose defensive formation, conserving fuel, probably heading to intercept an incoming bomber stream. For American fighters, climbing directly into their midst makes absolutely no tactical sense whatsoever. Carr uses their confusion brilliantly. He slips smoothly into the back of the formation, positions himself perfectly behind a Bf-109, and fires a controlled burst. The German pilot never even sees him coming. The 109 explodes in a ball of orange flame. Carr immediately shifts to another target without celebration, an FW-190 this time. 3 seconds of concentrated 50 caliber fire. The Focke-Wulf rolls inverted and plummets toward the earth, trailing black smoke. The German formation begins to scatter in panic. They don't know how many Americans are actually attacking. They can't tell where the fire is coming from in the chaos. Carr moves through them like a wolf hunting through a flock of sheep, picking targets methodically, firing precisely, moving instantly. Third kill, fourth kill, fifth kill. In the space of just 3 minutes, First Lieutenant Bruce Carr shoots down 5 German aircraft. His 3 wingmen account for 10 more between them. 4 American pilots against 60 Germans. 15 German aircraft destroyed. 0 American losses. Not a single Mustang takes serious damage. When the ammunition finally runs out, Carr leads his flight calmly back toward base. The surviving Germans, 45 of them, scatter across the German countryside like leaves in a storm. April 9th. Bruce Carr is promoted to captain. The Distinguished Service Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor in prestige, is awarded for his actions on April 2nd. The citation reads, quote, completely disregarding his personal safety and the enemy's overwhelming numerical superiority and tactical advantage of altitude, he led his element in a direct attack on the hostile force, personally destroying 5 enemy aircraft and damaging still another, end quote. Bruce Carr becomes the last ace in a day in the European theater of World War II. No American pilot will match his feat before Germany surrenders 3 weeks later. By the end of the war, he's flown 172 combat missions and accumulated 14 or 15 confirmed aerial victories. The records differ slightly depending on the source, plus numerous ground kills that were never officially counted. He's 21 years old. The war ends in Europe. Most pilots go home, hang up their wings, try to forget. Bruce Carr stays in uniform. Flying is what he does. It's who he is. He joins the Acrojets, America's first jet aerobatic demonstration team, flying F-80 Shooting Stars, pushing the limits of jet technology. Then Korea erupts in 1950. Carr flies 57 combat missions in F-86 Sabres with the 336th Fighter Interceptor Squadron. Hunting MiGs over the Yalu River, he commands the 336th from 1955 to 1956. Full Colonel's Eagles on his shoulders now. The farm kid from Union Springs, New York, running an entire fighter squadron. Then Vietnam, the Third War. Colonel Carr, now 44 years old, flies 286 combat missions in F-100 Super Sabres over the jungles and rice paddies. Close air support, precision bombing runs, strafing missions against enemy positions. The same deadly work he did 24 years earlier in a different war, in a different aircraft against a different enemy. 3 wars spanning 3 decades. 3 aircraft generations, from propellers to jets. 515 total combat missions. He finally retires in 1973. April 25, 1998, St. Cloud, Florida. Bruce Ward Carr dies of prostate cancer in a hospital bed. He's 74 years old, surrounded by family. They bury him with full military honors in Arlington National Cemetery, Section 64, grave 6,922. Among the heroes of every American war since the Revolution, within sight of the tomb of the unknown soldier, across the river from the Lincoln Memorial, the white marble headstone lists his rank, Colonel, United States Air Force. It lists his decorations, Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Legion of Merit. Distinguished Flying Cross with clusters, Air Medal with clusters, Purple Heart, it lists his wars, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. It doesn't mention the Focke-Wulf. It doesn't mention the 4 days alone in the Czechoslovakian forest with nothing but determination keeping him alive. It doesn't mention the belly landing with no gear, while his own people shot at him, the MPs pointing loaded rifles at his mud-covered face. The commanding officer asking in disbelief, "Where the hell have you been?" Some stories are simply too big for headstones. There are 2 ways to tell the story of Bruce Carr, 2 different narratives. The first is pure legend, the stuff of Hollywood movies. The downed pilot who stole a German fighter from an active enemy airfield figured out the controls entirely by trial and error in the darkness and flew 200 miles back to Allied territory, while literally every gun in Europe tried to shoot him down. The second way is the cold documented record, the official history. The ace with 15 confirmed kills, the Silver Star recipient for valor, the Distinguished Service Cross winner. The officer who led for aircraft against 60 enemy fighters and won decisively. Both versions are absolutely true. Both are equally remarkable. But here's what really matters, what the story is truly about. In November of 1944, an American pilot found himself completely alone, unarmed, and stranded 200 miles behind enemy lines in hostile territory. The rational choice, the smart choice, the choice any reasonable person would make was immediate surrender. The safe choice was giving up and hoping for decent treatment as a prisoner. Bruce Carr chose something different. He looked at a German fighter aircraft covered in unfamiliar instruments and unreadable controls, and saw not an impossible obstacle, but an opportunity waiting to be seized. He climbed into a cockpit he'd never seen before in his life, started an engine he'd never operated, and flew an aircraft he'd never even touched before that moment. Not because he was reckless or suicidal, but because he fundamentally refused to accept that his options were limited only to the ones that seemed immediately possible. 4 months later, faced with 60 enemy fighters and only 4 friendly aircraft, he made exactly the same calculation all over again. The rational choice was immediate retreat. The safe choice was survival through evasion. He chose attack instead, and 15 German pilots never made it home to their families that day. In 1997, just 1 year before his death, Colonel Bruce Carr flew one final time. Kermit Week's Fantasy of Flight Museum down in Florida had invited him for an air show, a celebration of warbirds and the men who flew them. Carr, now 73 years old, with more gray hair than brown, arrived in a perfectly restored P-51 Mustang, his own aircraft lovingly maintained in flying condition by people who understood what it represented. He came in over the assembled crowd at 300 knots, 50 feet off the deck, the Merlin engine howling. The same aggressive approach he'd used 50 years earlier when he was flying a stolen Focke-Wulf into a French airfield, while his own countrymen tried desperately to shoot him from the sky. Some things, apparently, never change with age. The crowd stood transfixed, watching a 73-year-old man throw a World War II ejection fighter through aerobatic maneuvers that would challenge and exhaust pilots half his age. Loops that pulled the blood from his head, rolls that twisted the aircraft through impossible angles. High-G turns that pressed him deep into his seat with forces that would gray out younger men. When he finally landed, touching down smooth as silk, someone in the crowd asked him what he was thinking up there in the cockpit during those maneuvers. He shrugged. That same casual shrug he'd probably given 1,000 times before. "Same thing I was always thinking," he said simply. What's the airplane truly capable of? What am I capable of? Let's find out. That's the real Bruce Carr story, the one that matters. Not the stolen fighter, though that's a hell of a tale. Not the 15 kills, or the 3 wars, or the 515 combat missions, though those numbers are staggering. The story is actually much simpler than all of that. The story is about a pilot, just one man, who looked directly at impossible odds, odds that would make anyone else quit, and asked himself one fundamental question: what else can I do? Distant thunder rolls across the years. The engines have long since gone silent. But somewhere over Czechoslovakia, over France, over Germany, over Korea, over Vietnam, you can still hear them if you listen carefully. The sound of a pilot who refused to accept impossible as an answer. The sound of a man who saw limits as nothing more than suggestions. The sound of Bruce Carr, still flying, still fighting, still asking that same defiant question. What else can I do?